On today's show, if the Houston Rockets keep the number 10 overall selection in the 2025 NBA draft, who are the most intriguing options for them to select? On today's show, we take a look at Kasparas Jakucionis, Carter Bryant, and Khaman Maluach. It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Thursdays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, where the best way you can help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing, and then go and like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. We're starting our NBA draft coverage here at Locked On Rockets. We're going to get some early impressions from some of the available options for the Houston Rockets with the 10th overall selection in the 2025 NBA draft. Big, like bold 72-point font, if they keep that draft selection. They're being involved in so many different rumors and trade speculation and all this stuff that, maybe they don't keep the pick. But if they do keep the pick, who are the most intriguing options with that number 10 overall selection? There are a bunch of names on the board that we're going to kind of go through and get some early impressions of, taking a look with the local experts from across the board here at Locked On, as well as the insight from our resident draft expert, Rafael Barlow. And then, we'll dive into deep dive kind of draft profiles on these guys in the weeks leading up to the NBA draft. So without further ado, let's get into the first guy here, the guy who is being consistently mocked to the Houston Rockets at pick 10 across the board, whether you look at, the Locked On mock or the ESPN mock or the Athletic mock. Kasparas Jakucionis. Let's hear from the local expert for more.
Let me tell you why Kasparas Jakucionis might be the sleeper of the NBA draft. My name is Sonny Verma, your host at Locked On Illini, and let me tell you a little bit about Kasparas. Kasparas was one of the best players in the entire country for the first 2 months of the season, carrying this Illinois team to 22 wins on the season. He did have an injury about 3/4 of the way through and didn't quite recover from that. But if you're looking for a 6'4.5" point guard with size, poise, and ice in his veins, you can't do much better than Kasparas. Sure, his game is not flashy, but it brings you results. I'll tell you, any NBA team is going to be very lucky to draft Kasparas.
All right, so that's the local expert on Jakucionis. Let's get the national insight from our Locked On NBA Draft big board expert, Rafael Barlow. So the strengths for Jakucionis: he brings good positional size and versatility to play on or off ball. He's one of the most complete statistical producers in this class, averaging 15 points, 5.7 rebounds, and 4.7 assists per game. While he's not an explosive athlete, he compensates with pace, craft, and intelligence. He's also been one of the most efficient finishers in the class, 64% at the rim overall, and 62% in the half court. Add in 5.1 free throw attempts per game on 84% shooting, and he's clearly adept at drawing contact despite not being overly quick. Jakucionis brings real intrigue with his blend of size, feel, and production. He consistently impacts the game in multiple ways: scoring, facilitating, rebounding, and shows flashes of a big guard who can dictate tempo. His range is as high as number 6, but realistically spans from the late lottery to the middle of the first round. There are teams that are fully sold and others still trying to get there. Regardless, there's no denying the impact he made during his pre-college season. Okay, so I'm kind of on board the Jakucionis hype train, right? Because the Rockets are in this position where, this is the whole, every year we debate, okay, do you draft for fit? Do you draft best player available? And generally, right, the rule of thumb in the draft is you want the best player available. And there's a real outcome where Jakucionis might be the best player available for the Rockets at pick number 10. And he fits a desperate need for them when it comes to shooting the basketball. Look, he managed to only, this past season, with Illinois, he managed to only shoot 32.7% from downtown overall, but pre-injury through January 1st, he was hitting 41.4% of his threes, and he was doing it with a variety of different attempts, right? He had like isolation step backs, dribble pull-ups. He was hitting them off the pick and roll, catch and shoot looks. And that's important, right? He's not just a one-dimensional, park him on the three-point line and all he can do is catch and shoot, right? He has an ability to self-create. And his, comfortability, right? Handling the basketball as a true combo guard in every sense, right? Being played on or off ball, right? Great feel for the game at such a young age. That kind of stuff generally translates, right? He's got kind of the general kind of European profile where, you play professionally overseas. And, it's very different stylistically than kind of the AAU centric basketball that we have here in the United States. And so I think he has the chance to be a really great connective tissue kind of piece. And you could really envision, a role for him playing alongside a guy like Alperen Sengun, right? A guy who can be a really great threat in the two-man game with him as a shooter, as a guy who has the comfortability to get downhill, to be able to finish at the rim. He's not a crazy explosive athlete or anything. And so that kind of, reduces his overall ceiling and kind of like his margin for error with things, offensively, defensively, that kind of stuff. He's never going to be a guy who just gets to rely on like his innate physical gifts. But he does have like a low center of gravity. He's strong. He can finish through contact. He's got a lot of craft to his game. And these are all things that make him a really intriguing prospect. Now, some of the weaknesses potentially here for Jakucionis, despite his efficiency at the rim and success getting to the line, Jakucionis often struggled to turn the corner against better defenders. He lacks burst, and that led to him settling for a lot of contested jumpers, especially step backs. That inability to consistently generate paint touches raised some questions about how translatable his on-ball creation really is at the next level. He also averaged 3.7 turnovers per game, often as a result of forcing plays when he couldn't collapse the defense. Defensively, there are valid concerns. Jakucionis isn't the most fleet-footed laterally, and that lack of quickness may cap his ability to defend in space. Ultimately, Jakucionis is a crafty, stat-stuffing guard with real feel and physical tools, but his limitations as a shot creator and defender raise questions about long-term upside as a lead initiator. Yeah, I mean, that's a solid read on Jakucionis. He's got the chance to be what feels like a solid kind of connective tissue piece, but the upside may not ultimately be there. I do think his skill set will translate into very easily translate into more of a supporting cast kind of role. Like even if he's just, maybe not quite the shooter that like Luke Kennard is, right? But a guy that can very easily kind of knock down shots from anywhere on the floor, can be a good connective tissue piece, can swing the ball, make the right reads, but isn't necessarily the guy that you want initiating offense by himself, more of a secondary or tertiary creator offensively. And then again, he will be a little bit limited on the defensive side of the basketball, but assuming you're able to put a quality defensive team around him, I don't think he's ever going to necessarily be a liability defensively, right? He's got good size, good strength. He's never going to be like, I think, picked on defensively. Now, if you leave him out on an island against, bigger, stronger players or smaller, faster players, then that could ultimately be problematic. But overall, I think he presents a really intriguing prospect at number 10. And if he's the guy on the board, the Rockets could do a lot less than selecting him and adding some much needed shooting to the roster. Definitely want your thoughts on Jakucionis in the YouTube comments. Coming up, Carter Bryant out of Arizona, a prototypical 3-and-D player. We'll learn more about him in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Skims. Look, when I found out Skims was making underwear for men, I'll admit I was intrigued, right? Having issues with underwear is the worst, right? You buy a fresh set of boxer briefs. Look, I wear boxer briefs, so I'm a boxer briefs guy. And, within 3 months of washing and drying and all that, they flare out. They're not keeping their fit, their comfort level. It just dissipates, right? It's the worst. They're not keeping everything held together. And finding the right style of boxers can be kind of frustrating. Skims changed all of that. Their men's line offers something for everyone, from boxer briefs to classic briefs, all designed with the perfect balance of comfort and style. I tried the Skims Stretch 5-inch boxer brief, and I'm totally hooked. I'm never going back to anything else. They're perfect for an active lifestyle. They move with me. They never lose their shape, and they stay in place all day long. Whether you're working out or just running errands, they're the most comfortable and reliable underwear that I've ever owned. Plus, the lightweight material feels amazing, almost like you're not wearing wearing anything at all. So shop Skims Men's at skims.com/LockedOnNBA and Skims stores everywhere. Let them know that we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey menu and select our show in the drop-down menu that follows. Skims is the official underwear partner of the NBA, WNBA, and USA Basketball. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, I'm really excited about this next prospect that we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about here in this segment. Carter Bryant out of Arizona. Let's hear more from our local expert.
Not necessarily long on productivity, but long on potential. Carter Bryant enters the NBA draft, and he is getting a lot of really good reviews. I'm Mike Luke from Locked On Wildcats. All right, Carter Bryant only averaged 6-4 this year, as a lot of people know, but shot over 40% from three-point range, measured it in over 6'6", with an almost 6'11" wingspan, an incredibly good kid as well that is going to interview well, and somebody that has been known by scouts for a long time, a McDonald's All-American. He fits in about anywhere, but worst case scenario, he's a 3-and-D player, and I think that's what really, really intrigues NBA scouts, is that this is a guy that you can pencil in and you know exactly what you are going to get from him. Could he be an all-star? Maybe. But worst case scenario, he's going to be somebody that's going to average in double figures, and he is going to be a very, very good part of any winning basketball culture.
All right, I might be a little irrationally excited about Carter Bryant, given the fact that his archetype at the NBA level is probably just a 3-and-D guy. But that's kind of a disservice, right? Because I feel like, you know, he kind of fits the mold of like a Tari Eason kind of type. In fact, there are some draft comps that directly relate him to a Tari Eason type, or like Toumani Camara with the Blazers, right? High energy, some defensive playmaking instincts, great feel on that side of the basketball. And with the Rockets being involved in so many different trade rumors and trade speculation this offseason, and maybe they make a big move or swing something big for a star level player, you know, some of the names that have been involved in some of this, you know, trade speculation have been Jabari Smith Jr. and Tari Eason. And if the Rockets do hold on to that 10th overall pick while still making kind of a big upgrade somewhere else on the roster, if they were to lose one of Jabari Smith Jr. or Tari Eason, a couple of the wings that have made this team so deadly defensively, they could do a lot worse than Carter Bryant to kind of replace them and bring in a guy who's going to be on a team-controlled contract for the next 4 years and be able to be an impact contributor. I think that Carter Bryant is, you know, has the rare ability to be both a high floor pick, because you know what he's going to be as a 3-and-D guy at the next level, but also an incredibly high ceiling pick too, because, you know, it feels like, you know, he only really scratched the surface of things at Arizona. Let's hear what Rafael Barlow had to write about Carter Bryant for his strengths. So Bryant is the type of prospect who could hear his name called in the lottery based more on long-term potential than immediate production. His freshman numbers at Arizona, 6.5 points and 4.1 rebounds per game, don't jump off the page, but his physical tools and versatility are what keep him firmly in the first round mix. At 6'8", 225 pounds, Bryant has the ideal frame and skill set to play either forward spot. He's a fluid athlete with length, switchability, and the ability to contribute without needing touches. He plays within himself, doesn't force shots, and shows real promise as a two-way wing. His defense in particular has caught the attention of scouts. Despite limited minutes, just 19 per game, he averaged nearly 2 combined steals and blocks per contest, so almost 2 stocks per game in only 19 minutes, a testament to his activity, instincts, and effort on that end of the floor. Offensively, Bryant shows flashes as a shooter and connective piece. He shot 37% from 3, and while he's not yet a high-volume scorer, his willingness to move the ball and fit into team structure bodes well for his role at the next level. A lot of that sounds perfect, right? A lot of that sounds like a kind of guy that is just literally plug and play. And while he may not be ready to make an immediate impact his rookie year, that's the type of talent that you could, you know, have as more or less of a safe bet, right? If you're the Rockets and you don't know what the future is going to hold, right, with Tari Eason and Jabari Smith Jr. and what their contract extensions are going to look like yet, or whether or not they're going to be included in a trade package for a bigger name somewhere down the line, Carter Bryant is exactly the type of guy that you bring in and you could have on a team-friendly deal, and he could easily give you 20, 25 minutes a night. And while, you know, he might not be the next Tari Eason, he might not be the next Jabari Smith Jr., he would be a guy that would absolutely be able to fit into Ime Udoka's defensive scheme. He gives the Rockets length, size, physicality on the perimeter. Again, playing either forward spot would be fantastic. So some great positional versatility there. And a piece that, Ime Udoka, with all his aptitude as a defensive-minded head coach, could mold into a really great defensive piece for this team. Let's get to some of the concerns for him. The concerns are straightforward with Bryant. He'll need to show more consistency as a shooter to unlock his offensive game. While 37% from deep is encouraging, a 69% mark from the free throw line raises legitimate questions about the sustainability of that perimeter shooting. Decision-making is another area of focus. While he shows flashes as a ball mover, Bryant has struggled with turnovers dating back to high school. He finished his freshman season with just 36 assists and 37 turnovers, a near 1-to-1 ratio that highlights the need for further development as a passer and overall offensive decision-maker. A lot of the read on Carter Bryant reminds me so much of the read on Tari Eason coming out of college. Now, Tari was in a bit of a different position, right? Coming off the bench and playing kind of that six-man role at LSU. And Tari also had a much better kind of scoring profile coming out of college than Carter Bryant did, or does, I should say. But the idea of both of them being kind of like defensive playmakers or defensive creators, disruptors on that end, while also being a little bit limited out of the gate offensively from a decision-making perspective, that kind of fits to a T. And so, yeah, if Tari Eason had to be included in a potential trade somewhere down the line, either this offseason or, at next NBA trade deadline or something like that, Carter Bryant would be a very solid replacement on the roster, and a guy that likely isn't going to need a ton of developmental reps. That's the thing, right? Is we know that this Rockets team has been kind of trying to balance, they've got, young guys like Reed and Cam who aren't even getting minutes. So how could you draft another young guy who's going to need minutes? The difference between Reed and Cam versus a guy like Carter Bryant is a guy that doesn't need these on-ball reps to grow and flourish and really feel out his game, right? He's going to be a guy that you can slot in and tell him, go play hard-nosed defense, go spot up on the three-point line where we need you to, go crash the offensive glass, right? Do all the things that you're supposed to do in your role, and he'll get better and get plenty of reps doing just that. He's not a guy that you need to really cater some offensive reps to really see what the true ceiling is for him as a player. And that makes him a really intriguing prospect for the Rockets with that 10th overall selection. Coming up, the final prospect that we're going to be talking about on today's show, Khaman Maluach, potentially the next step in the iteration of the double big lineup for the Houston Rockets. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Car Gurus. Look, shopping for a car should be exciting, not exhausting. But between the confusing prices and hidden fees, it can feel overwhelming. That's why I love using Car Gurus. They help you cut through the noise and show you the best deals with full confidence. With over 4 million listings, Car Gurus has more new and used cars than any other major online marketplace in the U.S. They verify dealers, provide real price analysis, and give you the tools and data you need to make the right choice without second guessing yourself. Look, recently, my girlfriend and I, we were shopping for a new car for her, and Car Gurus helped us out a ton. The best feature that they had, though, like she had a handful of cars that she wanted to look at specifically, the price drop alert. So if you find a car that you like, but you're not quite ready to go all in on whatever the price is at that point in time, you can set price drop alerts so you know exactly when the perfect car is available for your budget. Plus, they have in-depth vehicle details to give you the peace of mind before stepping onto the lot. Buy or sell your next car today with Car Gurus at cargurus.com. Go to cargurus.com to make sure your big deal is the best deal. That's cargurus.com, cargurus.com, cargurus.com. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Let's get to quite literally the biggest prospect in the 2025 NBA draft, Khaman Maluach. Let's hear from our local expert for more on him.
Khaman Maluach is a terrifying big man with paint menace labeled all over him. I'm JJ Jackson of Locked On Blue Devils, here to tell you why Khaman Maluach is worth a lottery selection in the upcoming NBA draft. The first thing about Khaman is obviously his size. At 7'2", he's literally one of the biggest players in the entire draft process and will be one of the biggest players in the entire NBA. This size does not make him lumbering, however. He moves with enough pace to outmaneuver his competitors down low, making him primed to be a great defensive player in the NBA. While his shot blocking numbers were not through the roof at Duke, expect him to continually improve on the art of the block and be a multiple blocks a game type player in the league. Offensively, Khaman is still learning different aspects, but it's a great sign when he's able to shoot 77% from the foul line given his size. As he grows more confident and aware of his size, he'll begin stuffing smaller players in the rim with potential to find some mid-range jumpers at some point in his career as well. Khaman Maluach can be a menace in the paint, and his potential is there to match his incredible size. For more Duke basketball news and notes, make sure you check out Locked On Blue Devils.
All right. Now, look, given the success that the Houston Rockets had this past season and well into the postseason, running the double big lineup with Alperen Sengun and Steven Adams, it has to be at least a little bit intriguing for the Rockets to consider taking a look at Khaman Maluach with that number 10 overall selection. Now, I will say that a lot of mock drafts have Maluach going before the Rockets would be on the board at number 10. And you take a look at some of the teams floating around there, right? The Pelicans are one that I could very easily see taking a swing on Maluach. They don't really have a long-term answer at the 5 yet. Could also see the Wizards doing it. Maybe if Trey Johnson's not there for Washington, Maluach and Alex Sarr in the front court together would be a really interesting pairing for years to come. So this might be a pick that is a little bit more out of the Rockets' reach, and maybe one of those where if he drops and he's there at 10, then it becomes a really interesting selection. But the idea of a massive, 7'2" big man with, that isn't he, and not a lumbering big, right? Not a guy who's going to be slow-footed and stuck playing one style of defense. Now he is going to be your traditional drop big at the NBA level, but I think that he provides some really interesting looks that the Rockets could run defensively and some things that they haven't been able to do with certain guys on their roster. Even Steven Adams, right? They basically just stuck with running zone defense when he was out there, right? They didn't really run Steven Adams in a lot of drop coverage, so it would give them another look defensively. And again, the idea of potentially pairing him with Alperen Sengun, given the fact that Alperen Sengun has shown an ability to slide down to that 4 spot, if the Rockets continue wanting to play their kind of jumbo-sized lineup in the future, potentially in the post-Steven Adams Rockets era, Khaman Maluach would be a really interesting option to consider. Let's get to his strengths here from Raphael Barlow. Maluach's numbers won't jump off the page. He averaged 8.6 points, 6.6 rebounds, and 1.3 blocks in 21.2 minutes per game. But you're not drafting him in the top 10 based on production. You're drafting him for what he could become. Maluach fits the mold of the modern NBA big, an athletic 7'2" center with a massive wingspan, rim running instincts, and flashes of shooting touch. He was a critical piece of Duke's top-tier defense, consistently using his length and timing to alter shots, wall up in the paint, and cut off driving angles. He plays with a good understanding of space defensively and has real potential to anchor a defense once his instincts sharpen up. Offensively, he finishes everything around the rim and shot a blistering 71% from the field. He also shot 76% from the free throw line, which suggests untapped shooting touch that he could stretch out to mid-range or even the three-point line in time. He's one of the youngest players in the draft, turning 19 in September, so there's considerable developmental runway here. That makes him a really interesting pick to me, right? Anytime a player is coming in that young to the NBA draft, you've got to imagine that there is some more untapped potential there. And the idea of Maluach potentially being able to expand and have some, mid-range, in his game a little bit later on, or even expanding his game all the way out to the three-point line, you start kind of imagining, okay, like, is he, Brooke Lopez-esque, right? And even Lopez wasn't really an athletic 7-footer, right? Lopez was a bit more of that kind of lumbering 7-foot drop big, rim deterrent presence. And, that becomes a really intriguing piece that you could potentially add to this Rockets team. A guy that you could build a defensive identity around, cater certain defensive schemes to playing, when he's actually on the floor. And the biggest holdup, right, in today's NBA, right, is, and we've talked about this with Alperen Sengun, we've talked about it throughout the playoffs and throughout the regular season with the Rockets and some of their spacing issues, is shooting is a need for this Rockets team. And so while Maluach doesn't exactly fit that need right away, the idea of a big who comes in with the possibility of being able to stretch the floor one day is incredibly enticing when you factor in everything else that he provides on the defensive end of the floor. And when you take a look at, the fact that offensively, he is a certified
lob threat.
So gives the Rockets some new angles to consider on both sides of the floor. Let's get into some of his weaknesses here. Maluach is still very much a work in progress. His offensive game is raw and unpolished. He'll bobble passes, struggle with touch outside of dunks, and can disappear for long stretches. Despite his physical gifts, he's not a dominant rim protector yet. He averaged just 1.3 blocks per game and didn't always impose himself the way you'd expect from someone with his tools. There are also questions about his offensive impact outside of being a vertical lob threat. There's not a lot of creation or post skill to rely on at this stage. And while the flashes of floor spacing are intriguing, it's not something teams can count on early in his career. Still, the appeal is real. He has the size, length, and athletic profile that every team wants in a center. If the skill catches up with the frame, he'll be a long-term NBA contributor. That's one other thing to consider here is the double big lineup with Alperen, Sengun, and Steven Adams didn't just work because you threw out two bigs and you called it a day. It worked because Steven Adams is one of, if not maybe the greatest offensive rebounder in NBA history. And that level of impact, as well as just his overall feel for the game, defensively, his ability to be in the right spots and wall up at the rim and the different things that Adams provides, gave the Rockets a competitive edge when they ran the double big lineup this past season. Maluach doesn't exactly have the rebounding profile of a guy that is going to command multiple bodies under the rim and is going to be a guy that is able to clean things up the way that Steven Adams was offensively for the Rockets. Now, maybe that's, catering this draft pick or catering the Rockets' future to the idea of a double big lineup that they kind of only used as a Band-Aid fix for some of their other offensive issues. Maybe isn't the best case scenario moving forward, but you also start to think about Alperen Sengun, right? And his offensive game, his ability to, attack from the perimeter, facing up and driving on opposing bigs, using his size, using his craft, his finesse, and the fact that hopefully, knock on wood, he comes back with a better 3-point shot next season. Then it becomes really interesting to think about a front line with Sengun at the 4 and potentially Maluach at the 5, even just in situational minutes as early as next season, but down the line, thinking about a defensive piece that could really anchor an entire defensive scheme and take some of that pressure off of Alperen Sengun, especially if he continues to be such a focal point offensively for this Rockets team. And then how Maluach might pair with other guys on the roster, right? For Jalen Green, we saw it very early on in Jalen Green's career and also with, the Rockets' affinity for Kevin Porter Jr. Shout out to Bruno Fernando, who the Rockets tried to turn into their certified
lob threat.
And it didn't quite work out because Bruno is not, a truly above the rim type presence. But if you have Maluach, a guy who just finishes everything around the rim, a guy who truly can play above the rim. Think about him as a screening presence for Jalen Green, right? Setting a crushing screen, rolling to the rim, and then Jalen Green using his downhill gravity to attack and then loft a pass over the top of the defense to a big who just has a free roam or a free rim run all the way to the basket. That could be a really dynamic pairing for the Rockets moving forward. So I think there's a lot to like there with Maluach. I think he's going to be one of the picks that is likely off the board by the time the Rockets selection rolls around at pick number 10, but he's intriguing nonetheless. And there is still a very real possibility that he could be available there at pick number 10 once the Rockets' time to make their selection comes around. With that, those are kind of early impressions on a few different draft prospects. Want your thoughts on Jakucionis, on Bryant, and on Maluach. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments. Who do you like? Who do you not like out of those three? Be on the lookout for more of our draft coverage, our early impressions on some of these prospects available at pick number 10. We want all your thoughts in those YouTube comments. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.